Então, boa tarde a todos. Vamos então dar continuidade para a última sessão, Keynote com Veronika Burian. Cumpro-me apresentar este nosso último convidado. A Veronika nasceu em Praga, estudou design industrial em Munique e trabalhou nessa qualidade em Viena e Milão ao longo de alguns anos. Depois de descobrir a sua verdadeira paixão por tipografia, terminou com distinção o mestrado em Typeface Design de Reading, no Reino Unido. Em 2003, trabalhou como type designer na Dalton Mag, em Londres. Viveu algum tempo em Boulder, nos Estados Unidos da América, em Praga, a sua cidade natal, e atualmente vive e trabalha na Catalunha. Veronika Burian é type designer, cofundadora da independente TypeTogether, edita tipos de letra premiados e colabora no design de tipos de letra adaptados para uma grande variedade de clientes. Está também envolvida na alphabets.org, uma montra de trabalhos e pesquisa sobre letras, tipografia e design de tipos produzido por mulheres. Continua a dar palestras e workshops em conferências internacionais e universidades, como é o caso hoje aqui. O seu tipo de letra maiola recebeu, entre outros, o Certificate of Typographic Excellence pelo TypeTogether Club em 2004. Vários outros tipos da TypeTogether foram reconhecidos por diferentes concursos internacionais, incluindo os Ed Awards e os ISTD. Permitam-me só fazer uma breve apresentação em inglês também. So now in English, Veronika Burian was born in Prague. She studied industrial design in Munich and worked in that capacity in Vienna and Milan over the few years. Discovering her true passion for type, she graduated with distinction from the MA in Typeface Design in Reading, UK, in 2003 and worked as a type designer at Dalton Mag in London for a few years. After staying for some time in Boulder, USA, and her hometown, Prague, she is now enjoying the life in sunny Catalonia. Veronika Burian is a type designer and co-founder in the independent type foundry TypeTogether, publishing award-winning typefaces and collaborating on tailored typefaces for a variety of clients. She is also involved with alphabets.org, a showcase for work and research on lettering, typography, and type design by women. She continues to give lectures and workshops at international conferences and universities. Her typeface Mayola received, amongst others, the TDC Certificate of Excellence in Type Design in 2004. Several other typefaces by TypeTogether have also been recognized by international competitions, including the Ed Awards and ISTD. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Veronika Burian.
I'm going to try not to touch these sensitive cables. All right. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. And I was asked to talk a little bit about my passion, let's say, and how it turned into responsible enterprise. And first, I'm going to look a little bit back and giving you about an idea how my path started and hopefully some thought on the future. So first, a bit of background. It was mentioned I'm originally from Prague, much of a city of Kafka, lot of melancholy, very different from Portugal or the Mediterranean. And when I was 6, 7 years old, we escaped to Munich in Bavaria. So that was during the communist regimes, during the Iron Curtain, where I basically grew up, went to school, and this is my old university, well, more of a Polytechnico actually as well, where I studied industrial design. And I mean, at that time, kind of product design really appealed to me in a way, in this sort of idealism I had, being able to influence people or the world even, you know, in a good way, to be a bit the interface between humans and their tools. And that's where I ended up doing things like that. My final project in Vienna, which was sort of a system for teenagers to hang out, basically, which did not exist. It was just my final project, nothing really came out of it. I moved to Milan, where I did some stuff like that. It was a design studio, a product design studio run by a Japanese who believed that women are not good at industrial design. They are not supposed to do such things. So he kind of pushed me more into graphic design. And in a way, it was actually not, it was a good fit in the end. More the 2D world than the 3D. I realized, I mean, for one, the reality of product design was really not what I expected, and I also realized that my ability of 3D visualization is not going to get any better. So I moved really much more into graphic design, and I discovered type. I discovered that through a friend, a typophile, an Italian, who kind of invited me. We formed a group, Die Kleine Fonderie, and he taught me, you know, font lab and some very much basics. That for me, it was really like falling in love in a way, and it seemed to combine a lot my artistic and rational parts of my brain. So the real beginning was Reading, where I'm still grateful to Jerry Leonidas, my tutor, that he somehow saw something in my very non-type related portfolio. We were super serious, you know, black, everything black, and just working, and but it was kind of my first experience of a community of helping each other. And writing also really sparked my interest in other scripts and languages in general. And here is also where I saw or kind of discovered the work of Czech artists, especially Preissig and Menhard. And they're kind of this vigor and in a way an elegance married with a lot of personal character and expressiveness really fascinated me. So they both worked at the beginning of the 20th century, Menhard later, a bit later than Preissig. And so especially Preissig here, he did very angular shapes, very handmade, kind of deriving a lot from his tools with a knife. And he did some beautiful book artwork as well, and things like that had a lot of idiosyncrasy, but then reading it, you know, or having it actually displayed as text, it was amazingly even and pleasant to read. So he was doing these kind of crazy things. And the Antiqua, that was the only one that actually got published. And this is Menhard. He looks like a chemistry teacher. I mean, this is not how you imagine a type designer today, I don't think. At least I hope so. He was a brilliant calligrapher, and always started from there. He really understood the kind of the intrinsic shapes of letters perfectly. And he was very eager to experiment though, so he really believed in progress and in modernity of type design. So he wasn't too much of a backwards looking person. So these two together probably with Zuzana Lichko kind of made me very curious and inspired some ideas for Majola, my first typeface in Reading. And although I never trained as a calligrapher, and the very few attempts I did were absolutely miserable, Majola ended up having quite a few calligraphic reminiscences. And because in a way, once you understand how the nib works, how the pen works, you can simulate and manipulate your Bezier curves accordingly. And as part of the MATD, I wrote a little essay on irregularities on type design. And that kind of influenced a little bit the design of Majola. This is Majola, and you see these very subtle details, irregular ideas. The theory basically is that these very subtle irregularities in shape, they help readability. I mean, I have absolutely no proof of that, yeah? Not enough research, but one can perhaps see that in old books, letterpress books, you always have this feeling of some comfort, yeah? And they are full of these little changes and subtleties. It has some kind of warmth. So here, and because Majola is quite expressive, it probably just fits the Czech language. I don't know. So far it has been mainly used in Czech. I have one funny story about Majola. And this is Michael Beil. He's a shepherd, a Czech shepherd, and there's even a such thing like an international confederation of shepherds. I had no idea. And he wrote me that he wants to use Majola. In his book, he prepared this almanac of shepherdness, shepherds, traditions of shepherds and stuff. And I was so curious, and I said, and of course, they don't have any funding, no money, and so on. So I said, yeah, sure, no problem. We can do a deal. You name a sheep Majola, and you get the typeface. And he was super happy with that. So this is the sheep Majola, who is running around now somewhere, I don't know, in Slovenia or wherever. And this actually is the almanac. It turned out a very beautiful book. So, like it was mentioned, I worked at Dalton Mark back in the old days when it was only 5 people, not 50, like now. And it was a bit like a second level of training for me. I really learned a lot. And this is Vodafone, they still use it now, which I did kind of based on another, well, on a phase that Bruno did a long time ago, but I had the opportunity to do the Greek and the Cyrillic there. So this is kind of my path, more or less. And all of these experiences really shaped me and my visual perception, you know, the kind of aesthetic values and a certain flexibility. I have this very strong feeling that type gave me a certain level of freedom and to be independent in a way and to have this ability to express myself and hopefully contributing to our culture. So I'm grateful that I can live anywhere. This is my house. A project in its own. It was an old house that we renovated, still not done. Anyway, my partner in crime. So 12 years ago, I founded TypeTogether with Jose, this guy. And we started really slowly, kind of a bit more of an experiment with Carmina, this typeface. And at the beginning, we really did not have, I mean, we had an intuitive feeling, you know, we had our main kind of focus and interest was in editorial design. And somehow that coincided, it seemed, with a gap back then. And we developed our kind of collaborative design, and this is still how it works today. So it's this kind of backwards and forwards, how it worked. We kind of bounce each other stuff off, we give feedback to each other, and we improve. Because having another pair of eyes is super important in design work. So Carmina was kind of developed really intended for pocket books, for really crappy printing and very bad quality. At the beginning, it was really just me and Jose, and we were dealing with all aspects of the foundry, and we did not have a business plan. No lawyers, nothing. But we had a lot of enthusiasm and passion. So we were running all aspects, and keep in mind that he was living in Argentina, and I was, well, actually back then I was in the US, but still, we didn't meet for 2 years. So back then, this is now 2006, 2007, this collaboration, or this level, this way of designing a typeface was relatively new, and we always got kind of wondering eyes, how do you do that? But over time, we needed help collaboration opened up even more and more. And for us, the typography, obviously, and type is an essential tool for communication. So we were kind of trying to convey that, not just on a business level, but also by teaching the value of type and kind of creating a sense of community. And we are trying to take an active part in that. We have this incentive program kind of aimed at to help young designers, students, really typeface students, to develop their careers. There's next year a new application happening. So TT is kind of a global, small company. We have a very strong core team, but also a broad network of collaborators and designers whose typefaces we publish. So this is kind of how our meetings look like, with Oscar, the mascot, but also like this. We, as you see, we like to enjoy life as well. And really the key points for us as a company is setting high quality standards, being involved in education, collaborating, and also designing with the view to the user, you know, so being aware of their needs. There's no point really blindly designing something that has no value to actual users. And I mean, that does not mean that there's no experimentation or no innovation, but at least by forgetting the type by not forgetting the type as a tool to communicate ideas, concepts, I think that type design can have a bit of a deeper value. And of course, good karma. That's super important. So these are our sort of key values, really, to build a company. And our library, we have, let's say, a curated catalog with a very particular focus still on editorial design, but also with an increased interest in multi-script design. So not just Latin, but all sorts of other scripts. And I mean, it's, I think it's quite important to have a clear definition, you know, of what your product is, so you can then really communicate that. But we are also trying to balance our, let's say, commercial needs with some personal interest. This is Brie, one of our first typefaces, really, which was a self-initiated project. But so I made the logo, and then we got requests all the time. What typeface is this? Until we figured, okay, let's do a typeface. Perhaps it's gonna be pretty good. And so obviously, you know, there was we hit some kind of gap in the market with this upright italic style. One thing we try to avoid is to repeat ourselves. So we do like variety within our kind of editorial way. These are just some examples of our fonts. And obviously, technology forces us to keep learning and to change. Every now and again, we do perhaps some historical research, but we don't really do revivals. And yeah, these are some by other designers. This is Belly by one of the incentive program, Roxanne. Okay, but not everything is that rosy. And so I'm going to give you a few pointers, perhaps, or thoughts. Licensing is still quite an issue. Users rarely really understand all the different licensing, and it did not get easier. Quite the opposite. There are still no real standards, except of perhaps desktop, perhaps web. There are still too many differences between the foundries within the marketplace. And with future applications, you know, of fonts, and the way users will interact with fonts will require different types of licensing or perhaps even distribution models. And indeed, I mean, there are already various kind of new ideas around, like, and it's a bit like the rest of society. You don't have just one way anymore to do things. It's so we have here like TypeKit, for example, it's a subscription model, or you have FontStand, where you can rent fonts. You have Future Fonts, which is a marketplace for unfinished fonts, so you can already get to use it and you get then updates. Or DJR's Font Club, which is pretty crazy. I mean, he's churning out fonts every month, a new font. One other, let's say, challenge, I think, is crediting. So at least at TypeTogether, we think that the time of big ego is over. Fair and proper accreditation is really important for the industry as a whole, and it kind of nourishes the community, of course. It helps to establish also type making as an endeavor, no? and kind of worthy of people's attention. And now there are also more and more larger teams and more complex work in that really needs, let's say, accrediting system. But of course, it's not just only about the system, or it's only partially about the system. It's even more so about honoring the often very unknown people who invest their skills in a project and in the production of the fonts. So last year with Jose, we came up with this sort of two-part system. We presented it at API. I don't know if anybody else implemented it, at least nobody told me so. But at least we tried to follow this through now with our own project. So it's a little bit inspired by the film industry. There's in our blog, or in Alphabets now, there's an entry if you want to read more about it. So you would have like kind of the leading credits and development credits. And depending of where these credits appear, the application. So for example, let's say on the web you can have the whole full credit list, or in a PDF specimen. But sometimes in a printed specimen you might not have all the space. So it's trying to give a kind of a system, create a system to really make sure that every person involved gets a say. And let's not forget competition. So, I mean, on the positive side, type really became way more visible over the last, let's say, 5 years or so in public. So there is generally a higher awareness of typography. But I think compared to now, when we started, making a name for yourself is definitely harder. But still, now as then, I think it's important to find a recognizable style, to have a clear voice, to really have a focus. I mean, if I say focus, I don't mean that, you know, it's a narrow, not at all. But I mean, for us it was, let's say, editorial style, and with a very special attention to accents, to diacritics. You have to imagine, in the very old days, like back in early 20th century, monotype, which was really big back then, right? It was hot metal and the like. They had only a few sets of diacritics that they would sort of choose more or less how it fitted the typeface. There was no real understanding of diacritics. So, and that kind of followed through, unfortunately, into a lot of the early digital type, and especially in English-speaking world where they don't use accents, they just see it as a add-on, you know, which they are not, of course. So we, I think that's why also one of the reasons why we were a little bit popular in Eastern Europe. So I really don't think that doing the little bit of everything works today. And then you have these kind of things, very cheap bundles that are not a direct competition, but this low pricing, it does create an expectation with the user that fonts should be cheap. And it therefore really underpins value of type and its makers. And it actually did force us to do flash sales ourselves, which is not great, but it's a way of kind of surviving in this market. And actually I must say that often schools and universities are really not helping. A lot of the curricula of the typography was reduced or totally cancelled. There's not enough education in terms of value of type. And of course there's an increase in free fonts, right? And users do often have problems separating excellent fonts from mediocre ones. So it's up to us again to educate. Well, so one of the big challenges, of course, is technology, and it does influence, you know, it influences the decisions on a foundry level directly, and the challenge is kind of to keep up a little bit as well. So new tech has always been a driving force behind typography and type design. Just kind of think about, I don't know, old typesetting machines, photo composition, digital revolution. It all made new type come out. And the processes and the media, you know, where fonts and typography become visible, where they are present, are much more dynamic these days, and they will be developing even more so. So there's a definite increase in sophistication of screens, a much higher rendering quality than used to be, and that has an impact on the design and the quality of type design. So like in earlier days, coarse screens, excuse me, coarse screens meant that you needed very sturdy shapes, think like Badana or Georgia, you know, and that the so-called hinting was necessary. But that with the shift to more high-res screens, you can render more finer details now, so hopefully we'll see a bit more serif fonts rather than all this bland sans stuff. And we have heard from Miguel yesterday a bit about VR, AR, MR. I did not know what MR was. It's apparently mixed reality. So, okay, whatever that is. But it basically means that designers really must consider different variables now. You know, you have motion, you have volume, you have sound, and so all this immersive experience is something quite different from the 2D world, and it can be even disturbing for us who are so used to type in a 2D environment to then all of a sudden seeing this in a 3D, being extruded, distorted, or whatever, and being very active. So there are still, you know, plenty of questions of how actually type should be rendered, what it means to work with type in an environment like that where things get totally distorted. And apparently so far a sans works better, I mean, according to this guy who did a lot of tests with different typefaces. The technology a bit less futuristic, what Miguel yesterday very well explained, the variable font. That's definitely a technology that is impacting our business. And I mean, it was born as a compression technology, right? It's kind of offering really a lot of possible improvements for the user experience and type performance in particular. So like, for example, one of the biggest advantages is an improved loading time. You get improved responsible design and even a new level of refinement. So like, I don't know, for example, if optical scaling is coming back, right? So depending on the size of the screen, of the type, you can get all these variations happening automatically online. Or you can have a lot of fun with it as well, like some students from the Czech Academy. So there are all these new opportunities opening up. But it's not just technology that really makes a difference or has an influence. It's also social habits, culture, and like, for example, the increase in the whole web environment, the way we interact with contents, that so much more happens online these days, and that means also more data, more content is being delivered online. Meant that typography became more important, and because it's still, you know, a lot about loading time, right? Just think back a few years, you couldn't just so easily look at stuff on your mobile. You did not have enough data. So all these markets are not really stationary, and we as a foundry or as makers have to, in a way, respond to that. So one of these projects became Portada. This is just a little kind of video we did. We actually started Portada in a way for our website. It was a bit of an incentive because we wanted to have a serif font for body text. And the other project that was, let's say, influenced by these data-heavy new contents is Protipo, where we had a bit of different families for different applications. And here we built a mini site, so we built a variable font with both of them, Portada and Protipo. And for Protipo we did a variable font. So just before there was, so you can, the mini site uses real data. For example, it uses trending words from Twitter, and depending on the size of the word and the popularity of the topic, it changes the typeface. So all these things kind of happen automatically. So you can do, you know, these plays. But apparently it was quite, not apparently, but it was quite a challenge for the programmer to implement the real-time data and the variable font. So it took way longer. And with ProTypo, what you can also do with the variable font is you can do these so-called jumps. Yeah, so depending on, again, on the size and the thickness, a few letters will change in shape for readability. They change automatically. But we like print, so we do little specimens as well. Here are both of them together. And one other kind of fact that over the last few years, well, very few actually, perhaps the last 3 years or so, what happened is that content building became way more important. So a big part of our team is actually primarily occupied with graphic design, with content building, writing, be it an article on Arabic anatomy, educational or informative articles, or a little thing about a launch we had, or an article on variable fonts. So we realized that we really need to kind of stay in touch, stay dynamic, and it's just not enough anymore to publish a font and then wait. You have to be way more in contact and deliver more than just a quality font. And one big, let's say, outlook for us is really our long-term goal is to go global in terms of coverage of script and language coverage, which in a way was a bit sparked in my Reading days, but over the years increased. So we collaborate either because we design them ourselves, but we always collaborate with, let's say, experts and consultants in the different writing systems. We certainly don't want to Latinize other scripts. It's important to be kind of true to typographic traditions in other scripts. And as a start, so these are scripts we are covering at the moment and will be, hopefully, with Bengali and Telugu over the next year or two. And we started with 3 families to expand only those 3. Because you can imagine this is a lot of work with a very uncertain outcome. I mean, on a commercial level. And, yeah, so we have these Adèle Sans, Ebony and Portada who are going in that direction. This is Adèle Sans, so this is what we have more or less so far, which is pretty much tackling, so once we have Bengali, we'll be tackling more or less 80% of the world population. And, well, we'll hopefully continue adding more support. And one of the other things is probably that, especially Adèle Sans is you know, offering quite a broad range of weights, which is still quite unusual. And we just released the Deva, which Jose and me, we started 5 years ago, and it took really a long time and quite an effort. We worked with 3 different people, and in the end, Pooja Saxena, she really helped us finishing this thing. And we even have a very good relationship, a partnership with FounderType. It's a Chinese foundry where we are matching their existing Chinese with some of our fonts. So it's about looking for similar details, trying to match the weight, yeah, and perhaps even some of the DNA. So just as a very short conclusion, you know, does type and typography has a future? Of course it does. Of course, certainly. Sure, it might not change the world, but it can at least help to communicate better with each other and with communities, with the environment, and hopefully transport values and important concepts. So I hope I could...
Okay, thank you so much. Veronika, yes, please join me here. Yeah. Really nice talk and inspiring. I think you started by saying that you were not going to speak about business models, but there's a lot of business going on during our presentation. I think it really showed a bit of the state of the art. It was really nice to see the progression of the work, and also the TypeTogether, Type Foundry, and those different applications. So now, do we have any questions, perguntas para a palestra? Alguém? Don't be shy. Questions, perguntas? Alguém? Ok, estamos ali. António.
Hello. Hello. Thank you for your presentation. It's not quite a question. Whoops. It's not quite.
The end of the conference. Everything is falling apart. Yeah.
It's not quite a question, but you said something that stuck in my ear. You said in the beginning of the presentation that you use discrepancies in the typeface, and you didn't have any bibliographic backup to that theory, and that caught my attention because I'm not sure if you are familiar with the work of Laszlo Mandel.
Yeah.
He has some points about that, and in his typefaces he used to use that. He used to make the serifs a little bit different so we can get that organic feeling.
Yeah.
Mainly because he was working in small typefaces, really small typefaces, so that was very important so the reader could follow up. That's just what I want to say.
Sure. You know, what I meant was that I don't have proof of the actual that it really helps with readability. I know about Mandel. Menhard also had his ideas, but I can't. You know, I did not do tests with readability tests. Yeah, to really prove, okay, people do prefer reading when it's, they prefer to have this more organic feel for text faces. But yeah, I should look a bit more into Mandel.
Just another point in that, it's funny because I made a work with a typeface from him, and I made a test. It was a typeface design for the Portugal contest. And I made a test in 20 users. And one of the points that he pointed was the beginning of the letters, because it was used in alphabetic order, should have that small discrepancy. So the reader, when he's following up his search word, could easily identify the difference. Just to say that in 400 possible responses to my test, only one error was committed, and precisely because it confused the M with N, because unfortunately he said that, but in fact his M and N had the same beginning. So, and one person get confused with that typeface. So, with that letter, with that point. Okay, it's just a test, but it was proved empirically, I think, just to say that.
Mais alguém? Anyone? Luís?
Hi, Veronika. Thanks again. I'd like to say, I don't know if you ever noticed the logo of TypeTogether. They have a claim which is high quality fonts. So, like more or less, like you know, those claims like probably the best lager in the world or the best beer. You really?
Sorry, say it again.
You have a label or you have a claim saying you have high quality fonts, that you do high quality fonts. Yeah. And well, I agree with you, of course. But what can you say about it? Well, it was a high quality presentation as well, let me say. But can you say just a little bit about why do you why do you have this claim, high quality fonts? Of course we know, but I'd like to hear from you.
Okay.
It's a challenge.
All right. Well, we try to do the things right on a technical level and on an aesthetic level, that our curves are actually bumpless. They have a good flow and are aesthetically pleasing, and also have a certain level of, I don't know, innovation might be too strong a word, but at least some level of recognizability. We try not to repeat ourselves. Like I was saying to Seb before, that I'm really not interested in producing variations on geometric fonts for the rest of my life. So we try to at least come up with a strong concept. Yeah, but so that's one, that's kind of the aesthetic, let's say, but also technically, at least when we started and when we kind of came up with this tagline, there were really a lot of crappy fonts, technically. Really, really bad. I mean, they're still there. But because the font tools improved, it's now easier to produce, at least technically, a good font than it used to be in our old font lab days. So yeah. Okay.
Anyone else? Again over there. Miguel, please tell me time. Are we okay? Okay.
Hello. Did your industrial design education had some influence in your typography work?
Yes and no. I think it had a certain influence on the level of a system, yeah, that with type you create a system that has a function. So I think, I mean, for me, type is not an art. Yeah? Type design is really, has only value if it has a function, it fulfills. It's a tool for other people to use and create something. And in a way, industrial design or product design, at least in my kind of idealistic view, was exactly that. It was an interface and a way of making people's lives better, easier. And I mean, from just kind of skill set, I don't think so. I mean, I don't necessarily see a direct relationship in terms of the skill, but more on a kind of conceptual level.
Okay. One last one. Uma última pergunta, alguém? Já estamos um bocadinho adiantados no tempo. Ninguém? Foi o Pedro, ok. Ali à frente, ali à frente.
Desculpa, vai ser pequena. No, thank you, Veronika, and for your presentation, and thank you for finally being here in our conference. I was wondering, because I was struck by your, one of your phrases, and actually the last one you've said, the time for big ego is over. So you work in a, the time for big ego is over.
Sorry, the what?
Big ego.
You said something about collaboration, okay. and you showed us your collaboration methods. So can you clarify, can you go a bit deeper into your methods of going back and forth? So the question is, how important, or what's the role of the collaboration in your design, your art design process?
I should have probably stayed a bit longer on that. I did not want to overreach in time, so that's why. Okay. Well, collaboration is a fundament for my work with in TypeTogether and with José. We basically, once we started to work together, always worked together on the same project. Like I was saying, it's really important to have another pair of eyes, because obviously when you're on your screen and you kind of draw and design and whatever, at some point you totally lose your view. Yeah? You totally lose a way of seeing it critically, what you're doing. So then it's great to have somebody you trust, you share similar, let's say, aesthetic values, yeah, I mean, in terms of type design. And so, yeah, we bounce it off. I must admit, though, that now I'm more of a manager than a type designer. I mean, I still draw, but because, you know, our team grew that much, I have a different role now. But still, we have always a few our own initiated projects with José, and it's like, I don't know, either he comes up with an idea or I draw a few letters and then goes back to him, back to me. We fine-tune our work. We discuss a lot. Yeah. So we kind of discuss the family. We never start with just one weight. Yeah. It's always, there has to be an idea for a system or for the whole family. And yeah, and then it's about dividing work, or somebody else from our team continues, or yeah. But it's very important, collaboration, definitely, on every level for us. Also, like if you think of the multi-script design, I could not just publish something that has not been reviewed by a consultant, by somebody who actually can read the script. Yeah, that's very important. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you once again, Vitória, for being here.
Thank you.
Now, Miguel.